This is the story of a woman who thought moving into her dream home would be the start of peace and happiness. But little did she know, her new neighborhood came with watchful eyes, unspoken doubts, and an HOA ready to judge her every step. What began as a hopeful new chapter quickly revealed hidden layers of suspicion and prejudice. The morning sun stretched across the quiet suburban street, lighting up rows of neatly painted houses with trimmed lawns. Moving trucks lined the driveway of one home, their doors open wide as boxes and furniture were carefully unloaded. Inside one of the trucks stood a woman in her late 30s, wearing jeans and a t-shirt that had already gathered specks of dust from lifting cartons. Her name was Danielle, and this was the day she had dreamed for years, the day she would finally move into her own home. Danielle had saved, planned, and sacrificed for this moment. After years of military service, countless deployments, and enduring separation from family and friends, she was finally planting her roots. To her, this house wasn't just wood and bricks. It was stability, independence, and proof that her hard work had paid off. She stepped onto the driveway with a smile, her eyes scanning the front porch that was now officially hers. The neighborhood was peaceful. Birds chirped from the trees that lined the sidewalks, and children's bicycles rested lazily against garage doors. A place like this promised safety and community, or at least, that's what Danielle thought. As she carried the first box inside, she noticed the blinds of the house across the street shift ever so slightly. Someone was watching. She brushed it off. After all, neighbors were often curious when someone new moved in. By the time the second truckload was brought inside, she caught the same blinds moving again. Another house, a few doors down, had a couple standing in their driveway, speaking in low voices while stealing glances in her direction. Danielle adjusted the strap of the box on her shoulder and chose to smile, offering a small wave. The couple didn't wave back, by midday. A black SUV rolled slowly into the cul-de-sac. Out stepped a woman dressed in business casual, holding a clipboard close to her chest. She walked with an air of authority, glancing at Danielle's yard before jotting something down. Danielle had heard about homeowners associations, but this was her first real encounter. "Hello there," Danielle called, setting down a box. The woman looked up, slightly startled, before forcing a polite smile. "Oh, hi. I'm Marjorie. I'm with the HOA. Just making sure everything is in order with the move-in." The words were smooth, but the tone was not. Danielle sensed the caution behind them, the same kind of caution she felt many times in uniform when entering unfamiliar territory. She thanked the woman politely, but as Marjorie walked away, clipboard still pressed to her chest, Danielle caught the faintest narrowing of her eyes, as if she were studying more than just boxes and furniture. Later that afternoon, Danielle's brother stopped by to help with the heavier furniture. As the two of them carried a couch into the living room, Danielle noticed another group of neighbors gathering near the end of the block. They weren't hostile, but they weren't welcoming either. Whispers floated in the air, fragments of sentences she couldn't quite make out. Every so often, someone would glance toward her driveway and then turn away quickly when caught. Danielle kept moving, determined not to let it get under her skin. Yet deep inside, she felt the sting of being observed, not celebrated. Despite the silent stares, Danielle reminded herself why she was here. This house was meant to be her sanctuary. She pictured cookouts in the backyard, holidays with her family, and evenings sitting on the porch with a cup of tea. She thought about her career in the military, the battles she had faced, the discipline she had built. Compared to that, moving into a house, even with curious neighbors, felt small. But as the day ended, the uneasy feeling lingered. Danielle caught sight of Marjorie again, this time speaking quietly with another neighbor. Their eyes darted toward Danielle, and then back to each other. A cold realization crept over her. This wasn't just curiosity. It was suspicion. When the sun dipped below the horizon and Danielle finally sat on her porch, exhausted, she replayed the day in her head. From the shifting blinds to the whispered conversations, every small detail added up. The warm welcome she had imagined never came. Instead, she felt like an outsider entering a place where she wasn't expected or wanted. The HOA's presence loomed large in her mind. That clipboard, those notes, the watchful eyes of neighbors. None of them said anything openly, but their silence was louder than words. Danielle knew that her journey in this neighborhood wasn't going to be simple. She looked around the rows of homes, each one nearly identical, and realized she had stepped into more than just a suburban community. She had stepped into a world where her very presence was under a microscope. Danielle leaned back in her porch chair, staring at the stars above. She told herself she could handle this. She had faced tougher challenges in life: combat, discipline, loss. But this was different. This wasn't about war zones or missions. This was about being judged for simply existing. What Danielle didn't know was that this quiet suspicion was only the beginning. The tension would soon rise. The HOA's watchful eyes would turn to actions, and the community's silence would break in ways she could not have predicted. The night after Danielle's move had been quiet, but sleep didn't come easy. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw the image of blinds shifting and neighbors whispering. She told herself it was normal. People were curious. That was all. Tomorrow, she thought, she would wave again, maybe introduce herself properly, and the awkwardness would fade. But when morning came, the neighborhood didn't feel any warmer. Danielle stepped outside with a mug of coffee. The air was cool, birds fluttered between the trees, and lawns glistened with early dew. She walked down her driveway to collect the newspaper. From the corner of her eye, she caught the familiar sight: blinds across the street shifting just slightly. Someone watching again. She smiled tightly, held up her hand in a small wave, but the blinds snapped shut immediately. Her smile faded. They don't even try to hide it, she thought. Half an hour later, she saw a jogger slow down as she passed Danielle's yard. The woman's eyes lingered on Danielle's boxes stacked near the garage. She didn't smile, didn't nod, just stared for a long moment before running off. Danielle exhaled heavily, muttering, "Good morning to you, too." Around noon, Danielle was unpacking the garage when she heard voices drifting from the street. Two women stood near the row of mailboxes, speaking in hushed tones. Their voices weren't meant for her, but in the quiet neighborhood, every word carried. "Did you see the moving trucks? They were here all day." "I know. It's just surprising. I don't remember anything about a new homeowner on Maple Drive. Did she even go through the HOA board?" Then a pause. One of them lowered her voice, but Danielle caught it anyway. "She doesn't look like the rest of us." The words cut deeper than she expected. Danielle froze in place, gripping the edge of a cardboard box. She wanted to march over, confront them, but she didn't. Instead, she inhaled, held her breath, and forced herself to keep unpacking. That evening, Danielle noticed unusual activity at the neighborhood clubhouse. Cars pulled up, and groups of residents went inside. Through the wide windows, she could see people gathering around a long table. At the head sat Marjorie, the clipboard woman. Though Danielle couldn't hear the words, she could read the body language. Serious expressions, folded arms, shaking heads. Every so often, someone pointed in the direction of her street. Inside, Marjorie cleared her throat and spoke to the room. "We have a new homeowner on Maple Drive. Some concerns have already been raised about the moving process, the number of cars, and whether guidelines were properly followed." A man at the table leaned forward. "Does she even belong here? Was the purchase clear by the association?" Another voice: "I saw her yesterday. Music, trucks, people coming and going. It was disruptive." Murmurs of agreement spread around the table. Not one person suggested welcoming her. Not one offered to meet her. In that moment, the narrative of Danielle as an outsider was quietly cemented. Over the next several days, the watching continued. Danielle noticed it everywhere. When she checked her mail, blinds flicked open. When she carried groceries inside, a man walking his dog slowed to stare. A group of children on bicycles whisper among themselves before pedaling away when Danielle looked up. It wasn't loud or obvious, but it was constant, a pressure that never let her breathe. Freely Danielle decided to make an effort. If they wouldn't approach her, she would approach them. One evening, she baked a batch of cookies and arranged them neatly on a tray. With a hopeful smile, she walked next door and rang the bell. A middle-aged woman opened the door. Her face was polite but distant. Danielle introduced herself warmly. Hi, I'm Danielle. I just moved in next door. Thought I'd bring these as a hello. The woman hesitated before taking the tray. Oh, thank you. Welcome. Her tone was flat. The door closed quickly afterward, leaving Danielle standing alone on the porch. The next day, she overheard neighbors gossiping. She went around handing out cookies. Really? That's interesting. She's trying too hard. Laughter followed, muffled but sharp. Danielle felt her stomach twist. Soon after, Danielle began receiving small notices. One in her mailbox reminded her of community rules for lawn care. Another, taped to her door, mentioned a noise complaint. She stared at the papers in disbelief. Her grass hadn't even had time to grow, and she hadn't thrown a single party. The message was clear. She was being targeted. Every move she made was being recorded, judged, criticized. Danielle sat on her porch one evening, watching families laugh together down the street. Kids played catch on the sidewalk. Parents chatted in small groups. None of them invited her. None of them waved. She thought back to her years in uniform, to the nights she had spent overseas longing for home. She remembered the sacrifices she made, the friends she lost, all of it so she could return and live freely. Yet here, in a neighborhood of picket fences and manicured lawns, she felt like she was fighting another kind of battle. The whispers had grown louder. They followed her everywhere, at the mailbox, at the grocery store, even in the way neighbors' conversations paused when she walked by. That night, Danielle sat at her kitchen table. Her military ID lay beside her hand. She picked it up, staring at the familiar photograph, the proof of years of service and sacrifice. She whispered to herself, "They don't know me. They don't know what I've been through. But I'm not leaving." The neighborhood might have been building walls around her, but Danielle had faced walls before. She had climbed them, broken them, outlasted them. She wasn't about to surrender her home to whispers and prejudice. Still, as she turned off the lights and went to bed, she couldn't shake the heavy feeling pressing down on her chest. She didn't know when the tension would break, only that it would, and when it did, she suspected it wouldn't be quiet anymore. The first week in Danielle's new home passed in a blur of boxes, unpacking, and uneasy stares. By now, she had grown used to the way blinds shifted when she stepped outside, or how conversations halted when she walked by. It hurt, but she had learned to mask it with calm resilience. But on Saturday afternoon, the whispers turned into something louder. The sun was high, and the street buzzed with weekend activity. Lawns were being mowed. Children played basketball in a nearby driveway, and Danielle's cousin Marcus had come over to help assemble furniture. Laughter echoed from the garage as the two of them struggled to balance a heavy dresser to the narrow doorway. "Careful. Tilt it this way. No, your way." Marcus grunted. Danielle laughed, her muscles straining. "If we survive this dresser, we can survive anything." Music played faintly from a Bluetooth speaker. It wasn't loud, just enough to fill the garage with rhythm as they worked. For Danielle, the day felt almost normal, like she could ignore the tension for a few hours. But across the street, 3 HOA members stood together. Marjorie with her clipboard, a gray-haired man named Richard, and another neighbor, Susan. Their arms were folded, eyes locked on Danielle's driveway. They weren't laughing. They weren't smiling. They were taking notes. Richard muttered, his voice low but edged with irritation. "Look at that. Cars blocking the street. Music playing. All-day traffic coming and going." Susan nodded, whispering, "This is exactly what we were worried about. She's disrupting the neighborhood already." Marjorie scribbled something down. "We can't allow this to continue unchecked. If she doesn't respect the rules now, it will only get worse." Richard pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over the keypad. "Should I call?" Marjorie hesitated, then gave a small nod. "Yes. Report suspicious activity. Let the police handle it." An hour later, the sound of sirens shattered the calm. Red and blue lights bounced off freshly painted fences and manicured lawns. A patrol car slowed to a stop in front of Danielle's driveway. The neighborhood came alive. Doors opened. Curtains lifted. Families stepped onto porches. pretending to water plants or chat while their eyes stayed glued to the flashing lights. Danielle set down a box, her brow furrowing. Marcus looked up from the garage. What the hell? 2 officers stepped out of the car, adjusting their belts. One was tall and stern, the other younger, scanning the scene with cautious eyes. They walked toward Danielle's driveway. Ma'am, the taller officer said, his voice clipped. We received a call about suspicious activity at this residence. Danielle blinked, confused. Suspicious activity? I'm moving into my own home. The officer glanced around. The open garage, the scattered boxes, Marcus standing by the doorway. He scribbled on a notepad. We had reports of noise, multiple vehicles, and possible unauthorized occupancy. Marcus stepped forward, his tone sharp. Unauthorized? Are you kidding? This is her house. The younger officer tried to soften the moment. Do you have proof of residency, ma'am? A driver's license, utility bill, deed, anything with this address? Danielle's heart pounded. She had dealt with confrontation before, but never like this. In her own neighborhood, in front of an audience of watchful eyes. She could feel the stares pressing against her skin, could almost hear the whispers of her neighbors as they leaned closer to see what would happen be why now. A small crowd had gathered at the edges of the street. Children were pulled back by curious parents. Whispered conversations floated through the air. She's in trouble already. I knew something wasn't right. Who moves in and has cops show up the first week? Danielle heard every word, even when they thought she couldn't. Her jaw clenched as she pulled out her wallet. She had planned to show her driver's license, but her fingers brushed against another card. A card she hadn't expected to use that day. Her military ID. She held it up firmly, locking eyes with the officer. I'm Sergeant Danielle Carter, United States Army. This is my home, and I have every right to be here. The officer froze for a moment, his pen hovering above the notepad. He took the ID, studied it carefully, then handed it back with a different tone in his voice. Understood, ma'am. The younger officer shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the crowd. A ripple of silence spread through the watching neighbors. For the first time, no one whispered. No one smirked. Faces stiffened, and Marjorie's clipboard lowered slowly to her side. Marcus crossed his arms, glaring at the officers. So, you see now? She's legit. You just wasted everyone's time. The taller officer cleared his throat. Just responding to a call. Sir, no harm intended. But his voice lacked conviction. She swallowed hard, reaching into her pocket. Danielle tucked the card back into her wallet, her shoulders squared. She looked around at the silent faces, watching her. Her voice carried, steady and firm. This is my home. I've served my country for over a decade. I've earned this. And I'm not going anywhere. The crowd shifted awkwardly. Some looked away. Others pretended to check their phones or step back into their houses. But the message was clear. Her presence wasn't just questioned anymore. It had been challenged. And now, everyone had seen the outcome. The patrol car pulled away. Lights dimmed. Neighbors trickled back into their homes. Conversations hushed but urgent. Danielle stood on her porch, her chest tight, a storm of anger and sadness swirling inside her. Marcus put a hand on her shoulder. You okay? She nodded slowly, though her eyes burned. I'm fine. I just didn't think I'd have to prove myself like this. Not here. Marcus's voice was low but fierce. They wanted to humiliate you, but you shut them down. Danielle exhaled, staring at the rows of identical houses. She had shown her ID, silenced the officers, but the damage was done. The neighbors had drawn their line in the sand. That night, Danielle sat at her dining table, staring at the quiet street outside. She thought of all the battles she had fought overseas, of all the times she had stood firm in the face of fear. And yet, nothing stung quite like this, being treated as a stranger in the very place she was supposed to call home. The HOA had taken their first real step against her. They had turned whispers into action, and Danielle knew this was just the beginning. The storm had arrived. The patrol car's taillights faded into the distance, leaving behind a heavy silence. Danielle stood in her driveway long after the police were gone, her arms crossed, her heart still thumping against her ribs. Marcus hovered near the garage, his face stormy with anger. From behind curtains and half-open doors, the neighbors retreated back into their homes. But Danielle knew what they were doing. Phones would ring tonight. Texts would fly back and forth. The story of the woman on Maple Drive would spread like wildfire. She whispered under her breath, "Suspicious activity, huh? That's what I am to them." Marcus shook his head. "You shouldn't have to prove yourself to anyone. And yet here you are, showing your military ID in your own damn driveway." Danielle forced a small smile. It shut them up, at least. But deep down, she knew the silence wasn't victory. It was only the calm before something worse. The house felt different when she locked the doors at night. She turned off lights, double-checked the windows, and walked from room to room with unease lingering like a shadow. Every creak of the wood, every hum of the refrigerator sounded sharper. When she finally lay in bed, sleep evaded her. Instead, her mind replayed the scene over and over. The flashing lights, the officer's questioning eyes, the hush that fell over the neighbors when she revealed her ID. She pressed a pillow against her chest and whispered into the dark, "Why does my skin color make me suspicious? But my uniform makes me acceptable." The question had no answer, and it haunted her by sunrise. Danielle forced herself back into her routine. She brewed coffee, stepped onto her porch, and tried to breathe normally. Across the street, a man in a baseball cap bent over his lawn, deliberately avoiding her gaze. 2 houses down, Susan emerged with her dog, glanced at Danielle, then quickly crossed to the other side of the street. Danielle sighed. So this is how it's going to be. She picked up her phone and called Marcus. "Thanks for helping yesterday. I don't know how I would have handled that alone." "You don't owe anyone explanations," he reminded her. "But be careful. They'll try again. People like that don't quit." At the HOA clubhouse, Marjorie gathered the board members. The air inside was stiff, the blinds drawn. She slammed her clipboard onto the table. "That didn't go the way we expected," she admitted, her lips tight. Richard frowned. You saw the officer's tone change the second she pulled out that ID. They practically saluted her. Susan shifted uneasily. "She's military. That complicates things." Marjorie leaned forward, her voice sharp. "It doesn't change the facts. She's already disruptive. Multiple cars in her driveway, music, boxes lying around. Military or not, we enforce the rules. If she thinks she can hide behind her uniform, she's wrong." The room murmured in agreement, though not everyone sounded convinced. For the first time, doubt crept into their circle. Danielle's identity wasn't just a challenge anymore, it was a shield. But shields could be tested. As days passed, Danielle noticed a shift. The whispers didn't stop, they only grew bolder. At the grocery store, 2 women whispered loudly enough for her to hear. "She's the one who had the cops called." "Yep," and then played the soldier card. Convenient, isn't it? At the gas station, a man gave her a long, unreadable stare before muttering, "You people always bring drama." Danielle clenched her fists but kept her composure. She had endured worse. But this was different. This wasn't a battlefield far from home. This was her community, the very place where she was supposed to feel safe.